What if the worst day of your life was actually the day everything was being fixed? What if the silence you couldn't explain, the season when heaven felt closed and prayers felt unanswered and hope felt buried? What if that silence wasn't God walking away from you? What if that was God working? There is a day in the Christian calendar that almost nobody talks about. Not Good Friday, the day of the cross. Not Easter Sunday, the day of the resurrection. But the day in between. The day that has no miracles, no angels, no record of anything happening at all. Just a sealed tomb, just waiting, just silence. And buried inside that silence is a message so personal, so human, so quietly powerful, that once you hear it, you will never read your own story the same way again. This is Holy Saturday, and it may be the most important day you've never really thought about. To understand Holy Saturday, you have to feel the weight of what came before it. By Friday evening, everything had changed, and not in the way anyone expected. The man who had walked on water now lay still behind a sealed stone. The voice that calmed storms had gone completely quiet. The hands that opened blind eyes were wrapped in burial cloth. For the disciples, for Mary, for every soul who had pinned their deepest hopes to Jesus of Nazareth, Friday night did not feel like the eve of victory. It felt like the end. Think about what they actually witnessed. They had seen their teacher arrested in a garden, tried under cover of darkness, mocked, beaten, and crucified before noon, and by mid-afternoon buried. The whole arc from arrest to tomb took less than 24 hours. There was no time to process, no space to breathe. Grief arrived like a sudden storm, and it did not pass quickly. Now Saturday had come, and with it the Jewish Sabbath, a day of rest commanded by law, a day when no work could be done, no journey could be completed, no tomb could be anointed, no final act of love could be carried out. They were forced to stop, forced to sit with their grief, forced to wait, and for people whose whole world had just collapsed around them, waiting may have been the hardest thing of all. The tomb where Jesus lay was not left unguarded. Scripture tells us the chief priests and Pharisees went to Pilate the very next morning, Saturday, to request a security detail. They remembered something the disciples seemed to have forgotten in their grief. Jesus had spoken of rising on the third day. Whether they believed it would happen, no one can say with certainty. But they were not willing to risk it. Roman soldiers were posted, a seal was placed, the stone was secured, every precaution human power could take was taken. The question is, what exactly was unfolding behind that sealed door? The Apostles' Creed, one of the oldest statements of Christian belief, recited by millions of Americans every single Sunday, contains a phrase that stops many people cold when they finally pause to consider it. He descended into hell, or as other translations render it, he descended to the dead. What does that mean? The question is, what exactly was unfolding behind that sealed door? The Apostles' Creed, one of the oldest statements of Christian belief, recited by millions of Americans every single Sunday, contains a phrase that stops many people cold when they finally pause to consider it. He descended into hell, or as other translations render it, he descended to the dead. What does that mean? Christian theology, across centuries and across denominations, has wrestled with this line, and the most consistent answer points not to a place of punishment, but to a place of waiting. In the ancient Jewish understanding of death, the righteous dead did not simply vanish. They existed in a state called Sheol, a shadowy, intermediate place. Not a place of joy, not yet, a place of waiting for the promised redemption. Abraham was there, Moses was there, the prophets who had spoken for centuries about a coming Messiah, they were there, waiting, and Christian tradition holds that on Holy Saturday, Jesus Christ went to them, not as a prisoner of death, but as its conqueror. He carried into that darkness the victory he had purchased on the cross. And to those who had hoped, who had believed, who had lived and died by faith in God's promise, he announced, "The wait is over." There is something almost unbearably beautiful about that image. Generation after generation of faithful souls living in hope of a promise they could not yet see fulfilled. And then in the quiet of a Saturday they knew nothing about that promise arrived in person. This is what the silence of Holy Saturday contains. Not absence, not abandonment, a rescue. Of course, the disciples knew none of this. They were not watching a rescue mission unfold. They were sitting in a locked room, trying to make sense of a world that had stopped making sense. Peter, who had sworn he would die before he denied Jesus, was living in the crushing aftermath of having done exactly that, 3 times before the rooster even crowed. Thomas, the one history has called the doubter, was grappling with a reality that did not match what he thought he believed. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Salome. They were planning how to return to the tomb at first light, not expecting a resurrection, carrying burial spices, still in mourning mode, still preparing to complete a burial that had been interrupted by the Sabbath. What they were experiencing has a name that many Americans know personally. It is the space between a devastating loss and whatever comes after. It is the Saturday after the funeral, when the casseroles are still on the counter and the house is too quiet and you don't know what to do with yourself. It is the morning after the divorce papers were signed, the day after the diagnosis, the week after the job was gone. That suspended, disoriented, grief-soaked place where yesterday's world no longer exists and tomorrow's has not yet arrived. Holy Saturday speaks directly into that space. Because the message of this day, the hidden, unspoken, not yet revealed message, is this: what looks like the end may only be the middle of the story. Among all who waited on that Saturday, Christian tradition places particular attention on one figure, Mary, the mother of Jesus. She had been there on Friday. She had stood at the foot of the cross. She had watched her son die. Scripture records that the disciple John stayed with her, but there are no recorded words from Mary on that day. Just presence, just endurance, just faith in the most impossible of circumstances. She knew things the others did not fully grasp. She had heard the angel's words at the Annunciation. She had pondered them for over 30 years. She had heard Jesus speak of rising on the 3rd day, and now she waited. Not because the evidence was encouraging, not because she felt good, but because she had made a choice a long time ago to trust the word that had been spoken to her. Be it done to me according to your word. That yes, spoken in a small town in Galilee decades earlier, she was still living it, still holding to it, even here, even now, even with a sealed tomb standing as apparent evidence that everything had gone wrong. In American culture, we tend to celebrate the people who feel strong in their faith. But Mary on Holy Saturday shows us something different, something deeper. She shows us the person who doesn't feel strong and stays anyway. That is not weakness dressed up as faith. That is faith in its purest, most costly, most human form. There is a question that believers across every tradition eventually face. What do you do when God goes quiet? Not dramatically quiet. Not in a way that makes for a good testimony. Just quiet. The prayers seem to hit the ceiling. The Bible opens but nothing lands. The church service ends and you drive home feeling exactly as hollow as you arrived. For many Americans, many deeply faithful, genuinely believing people, this experience is not a crisis of faith, it is the experience of faith. And Holy Saturday is the patron day of that experience. The ancient church fathers wrote extensively about what they called the dark night of the soul. The mystic John of the Cross described it as a stripping away, not a punishment, but a purification, a season in which God allows the scaffolding of comfortable religion to come down, so that something more solid can be built underneath. On Holy Saturday, there are no miracles to point to, no voice from heaven to quote, no burning bush, no still small voice, just a stone, just silence, just waiting. And yet the Christian proclamation is that God was never more active than in that silence. The resurrection doesn't happen despite Holy Saturday, it happens through it. The silence was not a problem to be solved, it was the process itself. If you walk into most Christian churches on Holy Saturday morning, you'll find something unusual. Nothing is happening. No Mass, no communion. In Catholic and many liturgical Protestant traditions, the altar is bare, stripped of every cloth, every candle, every decoration. The emptiness is intentional. The church is not being careless. She is being honest. She is saying, through silence and bare wood and unlit wicks, we are in the tomb with him. We are in the waiting place. We are not pretending that Sunday has already come. This restraint is a spiritual discipline that American culture, in its constant noise, its relentless forward momentum, its allergy to stillness, finds genuinely difficult. We want to skip to the ending. We want to fast forward through the Saturday. But the church in her wisdom says, not yet. Stay here. Feel this. Don't rush the silence, because people who have never learned to sit in Holy Saturday tend to produce a faith that cannot survive it when it arrives uninvited in their real lives. The great vigil liturgy does not begin until after dark on Saturday night. When it does, it begins with fire, a single flame kindled in darkness. The Exultet, one of the most ancient hymns in all of Christianity, is sung. The scriptures trace the entire arc of salvation history, from creation to Exodus to prophecy to fulfillment. And then the lights come on, the bells ring. The Gloria, silent since Holy Thursday, erupts. But that explosion of joy means everything, precisely because of the silence that preceded it. You cannot fully understand the sunrise if you've never sat in the dark. Here is the invitation of Holy Saturday, spoken not just to scholars or monks or theologians, but to everyday people living everyday American lives. You have been here before. Maybe you're here right now. The diagnosis came back and now you are waiting for the next appointment, and the room feels too quiet. The relationship ended, and you don't know who you are without it. The dream you gave your best years to didn't work out, and you are standing in the rubble of it, wondering what's left. The faith you grew up with got complicated, and you don't know what you believe anymore, but you haven't walked away because something in you isn't ready to let go. That is Saturday. And the proclamation of Christianity is not that Saturday doesn't hurt. It does. The proclamation is that Saturday is not the final chapter. The disciples thought it was. Everything in their experience told them the story was over. They were grieving, hiding, and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their lives, now that everything they had believed had apparently collapsed. And they were wrong. Not because their pain wasn't real, but because the story wasn't finished. There was a Sunday coming that none of them could see from Saturday. Before we reach Sunday, let's sit one more moment with that stone. Heavy, Roman sealed, guarded. Everything that human power and political authority could do to ensure permanence had been done. And yet, Christian faith across 2,000 years and every continent on earth has stood on this claim: that stone moved, not because someone rolled it away, though it was found rolled away, but because the one behind it had already walked through it. And here is what that means for every sealed stone in your life. Every door that feels permanent. Every situation that looks final. Every relationship that seems beyond repair. Every dream that appears buried. Every faith that feels like it died somewhere along the way. The message of Holy Saturday is this: what God places His life into cannot stay dead. The silence of Saturday was not evidence of God's absence. It was the sound of God working in a way that human eyes were not equipped to see. The women came to the tomb at first light on Sunday. They came to anoint a body. They came prepared for grief. And what they found changed everything. Not just for them. Not just for the disciples who were still hiding behind locked doors. For every human being who has ever lived, or will ever live, who has ever faced a sealed stone of their own and wondered if the silence meant abandonment, the resurrection is the answer to Holy Saturday. Not a denial of it, not a dismissal of it, not a bypassing of it, an answer to it. God says, I know about your Saturday. I have been in it, I have been through it, and I am telling you from the other side it does not end there. The first word spoken at the empty tomb was not an explanation, it was an announcement. He is not here, He has risen. Holy Saturday asks something of us that our culture rarely asks. It asks us to be still, to resist the urge to fix, to explain, to move on, to manufacture hope before hope is ready to arrive on its own. It asks us to trust that God is present in silence, that stories are not over when they feel like they are, that the sealed stone is not the final word. If you are in a Saturday season of your life right now, if the silence feels heavy, if the stone feels immovable, if heaven feels distant and the story feels finished, this day was kept in the calendar of faith for you. You are not alone in the waiting. You are not forgotten in the dark. And Sunday, the Sunday that changes everything, is still coming. This is Holy Saturday, the day between, the day that teaches us how to hold on,